I was born Mary Elizabeth McGee in New Orleans. Unfortunately, there were so many other Marys in my family that calling Mary, half the room would turn around. So I got to be Mary Beth, which was kind of a cool thing. Get to have two first names. So I lived there through my entire youth and childhood till I went off to college. I went to Baylor for 1 year in 68, 69, and then ran out of money and came home. You know, typical situation. When you run out, you come home. And wound up meeting a young man that my father and his father thought we were made for each other. So we got married. We had a child together. My son is, you know, just the light of my life. You know, if there were anything that I had to pick on this earth that I don't want to go to heaven without, it would be him. And he is currently living in Illinois, which makes it hard, but I have him. You know, that's the thing. Down the line, I wound up, found out my husband wanted the babysitter more than me, and so he left, and I was on my own. Fortunately, I was not alone on my own because I had my faith, and I had my dear friends, the Olives, that had made me a part of their family. So all through my early days, you know, I was surrounded by this support system, the church and family. Then met a gentleman from Illinois. We got married eventually. And he was in the Navy, met him in New Orleans, and then moved up to Illinois after he retired. And that's how we wound up in Illinois. While I was in Illinois, I heard Moody Broadcasting was like Moody Bible Institute up there, and WMBI Radio were just the wonderful opportunities. And I'm listening one day to Moody Radio at a time that I don't usually listen. I had been teaching a class, and the morning class was fine. The afternoon class got canceled due to equipment failure. And so I'm in the car at midday, which I'm usually not. And I hear someone talking about the Right to Publish conference at Wheaton Bible Institute. So I wound up thinking, you know, I have a certain amount of discretionary income at this point that, you know, I was trying to decide what to do with. And if the tuition for this conference is under that amount of money, I'm going. And it was less than half. It's like, okay, Lord, I get the message, I'm going. Prior to that time, I had been writing. I've been writing all my life. Earliest time I was published was in the New Orleans Times-Picayune as a young people's page book reviewer. And that started when I was about 10. But then I did church bulletins, I did Bible stories, I did all sorts of things, but was never really published. I was just doing local stuff. So I went to this conference, and it just lit a fire in me to go further with my writing. Soon after, Katrina came through, and I had to come down and get my mom and take care of my mom for a couple of years. Then she went out to California and became ill. She went to stay with my sister in California, thinking it would be warmer than Illinois in the wintertime. The mountains of Northern California are no warmer than Illinois in the wintertime, but that was a whole different story. And so I wound up getting downsized from my job as a stand-up corporate trainer just about the time my sister was needing help with caring for my mom. So I went to California to take care of my mom. After four years in California, we had the opportunity to come home to bring my mom back so that she could be around her family again.
Now, were you still
down here.
Were you still married at that time?
No, I was not still married at that time because he decided he liked motorcycles better than me. I wear a different kind of a wedding ring now, and this one says, Jesus Saves, and it's a reminder. Way back in my youth, you know, growing up in New Orleans, you see a lot of nuns. they're everywhere. And I always thought, how wonderful to be married to God. And then I found out Baptists didn't have nuns, so I couldn't be a nun. Well, I am not Catholic and I'm not wearing a habit, but as far as I'm concerned, that's the only husband I need. And that's fine. When I came back down, my mom had always said, I really want to see your name on the binding of a book. I really want to see your name on the binding of a book. I was in a couple of anthologies, I was in a couple of magazines, and of course the newspapers, but I had not yet put out a book of my own. And when she passed away, I suddenly had all this time that I had been spending taking care of her. And the way that I helped to fill that time was writing. And I wrote my first novel, which was Death in the Daylilies. Now, it's a strange title for a Christian novel, but it came about because Trudy and our friend Susie decided I needed to get out of the house not long after Mama passed. And we went up to Hattiesburg for the Daylily driving tour. And as I walked around a shrub coming to another bed of daylilies, I suddenly had a vision of there's a body in the daylilies. Why would there be a body in the daylilies? How did they get in the daylilies? Who put them in the daylilies? What was the motive? What was the history? What was going on? And it just came out.
Did you call the police?
No. I pulled out my tablet and started making notes. And when that vision ebbed, I had the thought of the books. And so that started Ambush at the Arboretum, which is the new one that just came out, which is a body shows up, and we wind up in an arboretum with an ambush, obviously, and have just a good old time with Christians caught in difficult circumstances, and how do they face those circumstances. In addition to the two novels, I do a newsletter every month, and that newsletter includes information about upcoming writing events, writing contests that I find out about, groups that I find out about that people can affiliate with, and a short story, a free short story. After about 2 years, I put together an anthology of some of the stories into a short story book about Cypress Point, Mississippi, which is the fictional town where all of this takes place. It's in Pearl River County. It's just, it's a figment of my imagination, but it's also a compilation of Picayune and Poplarville and Carrier and Henleyfield and all the little towns in and around there. When I first came to the Lord, I was a child, and that whole passage about when I was a child, I spake as a child and all that. And I thought, wow, I know the Lord. This is so cool. I had a vision of standing at the foot of the cross and looking up, and I could see the blood dripping from his feet. And then when I looked further up, I could not make out his face. All I could see were his eyes, and they so captivated me because all of the love in the world was in those eyes. And I started crying, and my parents hurried me out of church because, here's this little kid crying. And I was told, no, you're not old enough to understand all of this. And, but when I was standing there at the foot of the cross, looking up and realizing that all this blood was flowing and all this pain was happening because of me, I said, this is terrible. I'm the cause of this. And he said, it's all right. You're worth it. Don't worry about it. You're mine. And so even though they wouldn't let me make a profession of faith because I was too young, and they told me that I didn't know what it was all about yet, I knew I was his. A couple of years later, they said, okay, you're old enough. You can do it now. You can make your profession of faith. You can be baptized. by that time it was, okay, yeah, right, whatever you say, because it really was just a symbol for them. At that point, I knew I was already baptized in His Spirit, and so the water was a nice symbol for the rest of the world, but I didn't count on that anymore. I wasn't holding out for that anymore. And no matter how many times they tried to tell me you're too young, there was always that voice saying, you're mine. And with that, I started on that journey that led to things like doing bulletins and writing faith-based poetry and short stories that then eventually led to the novel. When I had to stop attending the Right to Publish conference, I felt really, really hungry for that. And out in California, now if there are any Californians here, you have my apologies for what I'm about to say, but I had a really hard time finding faith-based anything in California, including writers' groups, till I came across a little tiny group called Inspire Christian Writers. And they met in a couple of different towns, none local to me that I could attend with my mom as she was, but I was able to communicate with them and get feedback on my work by email and that kind of thing. So I belonged to that group while I was in California. They helped me to stay focused on writing for the Word, not just writing to be writing. Through Right to Publish, I had met people like James Scott Bell, got in touch with people like Diane Mills, who taught me that, Christian doesn't mean sappy. It doesn't mean wimpy. It can be exciting. It can be dramatic. It can be danger and still be Christian, because it's how do the people handle the danger and the problems. That got me to a point where I wasn't afraid to take on writing a Christian novel to fill up those hours after Mom left. I know she was watching that day that they arrived and I opened that box. I hope she was happy seeing my name on that binding at last. I wish it could have been here so I could have seen her face, but that didn't work. But it's there now. I've been asked a couple of times about, well, if the stories were inspired by this trip for the daylilies, how autobiographical are they? Well, they're autobiographical in the sense that it's from a woman's perspective. It's from someone who's been divorced and found out that men were not always what they said they were. They pretend to be Christians. They call themselves Christian. And then you get married and all of a sudden they don't have time to go to church anymore. And they don't have time to do things. The one thing that I have to say about my second husband, I prayed about that one and Lord, okay. I really thought that my first husband was the one you meant because his father and my father were all for it. And, he seemed like a good Christian man. They were talking about putting him up for a deacon. And then all of a sudden, he wasn't. So that was a mistake there. For this second one now, I just, let me know if this isn't right. Is this the man that I should marry? And I waited, and I waited, and I waited, and I didn't hear anything. When things started to go south, and in fact I got accused of, well, I must be a terrible husband if I'm driving you to the church. It's like, you didn't drive me to the church. I've always been there, always been there. God, why did you let me do it? I asked you and I asked you. You didn't say no. He said, yeah, but I didn't say yes either. I should have waited a little bit longer for his timing, but I didn't. Mercy has gone through some of that with a man that wasn't the right man. The second sister is Trudy. Trudy has been the sister that I should have had for more than 40 years. We've been friends forever from the first time we met. We raised our kids together. She kept my son from being an only child because her 4 just kind of took him in and made him number 5. She and her husband became my family. And when he passed away, what do sisters do? I came home to take care of my sister. And she let me bring my mom with me, and it was all wonderful. My mom got to be with her family, and it all worked out. There are times when I'm writing something that's not biographical. The most recent short story that went out, the one that went out with the June newsletter, is not autobiographical. It's things that I've seen other people go through and sort of assimilated, other than she was in the Midwest, that she had gone to the Midwest. God gives us experiences. He gives us contacts with people who have had experiences that we can use to share His Word. It doesn't all have to be our experience when He shows us how to get through it and how to take that little bit and assimilate it into the rest and make it all work. As a Christian writer, I know that I'm not going to make the big bucks that a lot of authors make. There are other things that I could write, vampires and demons and things of that nature, that would probably sell a whole lot better. But I like the idea of, I'm not ashamed for my mom to see it, and I'm not ashamed for the Lord to see it. And when people come to me and say, "Oh, thank you for writing this, because I love a good mystery, but I don't like all the cursing and the sex and all the other stuff. Thank you for writing a mystery from a Christian perspective. Something that's going to be, anybody can share with their mom, their grandmother, their kids, and hopefully will make an impact along the way, because it is something that they can share." And maybe somebody who just likes mysteries, that wouldn't pick it up if they thought it was a Christian book, will pick it up and get the message that underlies it, even though it's not preaching it. It's just sharing it. God put this desire to write in me early on. I could no more not write than not breathe. And the writing that I want to do is for Him. I was intrigued when Marlene said, we want to talk about your journey, And I kind of feel like I can't talk about my journey because it's not over yet. But I can talk about what it's been so far. I don't feel like I'm there yet. I feel like I have a lot to learn. I have a lot to grow. Starting out as a child, it was really hard for me sometimes to understand, well, wait a minute, I'm a kid, and if I get it, how can you as a grown-up not get it? That this is God's world, and Jesus is His Son, and you need to believe in Him. Well, that's not going to make a whole lot of friends and influence people. I had to grow past that. So I have to grow, too, in my writing, in sharing the Word in a way that people are not going to turn away from the book before they get to that Word. That's what I hope to accomplish. That's what my goal is. And that's what I hope I'm on the road to. And thank you all so much for letting me come and tell you about it, because it has been a fun journey so far.